Welcome to Shadow of History, mysterious, dark, and untold stories from world history. Today, we explore the story of one of the most fascinating and enigmatic spies of the Cold War era, Richard Sorge. His life and death are filled with intrigue, deception, and espionage, and yet, his story has remained largely overshadowed by the more famous figures of the period. But Richard Sorge wasn't just another spy. He was one of the most successful and daring operatives in history, and his disappearance continues to mystify historians to this day. Let's dive into the life of Richard Sorge, a Cold War spy who disappeared forever. Richard Sorge was born on October 4, 1895, in Baku, Azerbaijan, which was then part of the Russian Empire. His early life was marked by a combination of privilege and turmoil, as his family moved frequently due to political and social unrest in the region. As a young man, Sorge developed a deep interest in politics and began studying Marxism, which would later play a central role in his life as a Soviet spy. By the time he was in his 20s, Sorge had already become a committed communist, and this ideological dedication would drive him to espionage and eventually to one of the most remarkable intelligence operations in history. Sorge's career in espionage began when he moved to Germany in the early 1920s. While there, he joined the German Communist Party and soon became involved in intelligence work. It was during his time in Germany that Sorge was recruited by the Soviet Union's military intelligence agency, the GRU, in 1929. His mission was to infiltrate the Nazi regime and provide vital information about Adolf Hitler's plans. Sorge's deep knowledge of Marxism and his fluency in both Russian and German made him an ideal candidate for espionage, and he quickly rose through the ranks. By the early 1930s, Sorge had become a master of disguise and deception, using his cover as a journalist to gain access to important political and military circles. He was stationed in Tokyo, Japan, where he became a prominent journalist for the German newspaper Frankfurter Zeitung. This role allowed him to establish connections with high-ranking individuals in both the Japanese government and the military, while still maintaining his true allegiance to the Soviet Union. Sorge's most significant contributions as a spy came during the Second World War. In the years leading up to the war, Japan had been expanding its influence in East Asia, particularly in China and Manchuria. Sorge, operating under the guise of a journalist, was able to gain access to key information about Japan's military intentions and strategy. His most significant achievement, however, came in 1941, when he provided the Soviet Union with crucial intelligence regarding Japan's plans to attack the Soviet Union. In 1941, as Germany and the Soviet Union were locked in a deadly conflict on the Eastern Front, Sorge was able to learn from his sources in Japan that Japan had no intention of attacking the Soviet Union. This was incredibly valuable information for Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, who had been under the impression that Japan was preparing for an invasion of the Soviet Far East. Sorge's intelligence allowed Stalin to shift his focus from defending the East to reinforcing his forces on the Western Front, which ultimately played a critical role in the Soviet victory at the Battle of Stalingrad. Sorge's intelligence also provided the Soviet Union with critical information about the timing of Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. Sorge had successfully infiltrated high-level Japanese circles and gained access to a wealth of military intelligence. His ability to gather and transmit this information back to Moscow made him an invaluable asset to the Soviet war effort. But despite his successes, Sorge's espionage activities were not without risks. The Japanese intelligence services, who were unaware of Sorge's true loyalties, began to grow suspicious of his activities. In 1941, Sorge was arrested by the Japanese authorities, who had discovered his true identity as a Soviet spy. The capture of Richard Sorge marked the end of his career as an operative, but it would not be the end of the story. After his arrest, Sorge was interrogated for months, but he never revealed any information about his espionage work or his contacts within the Japanese government. His loyalty to the Soviet Union remained unbroken, even under extreme duress. Eventually, in 1944, after a lengthy trial, Sorge was sentenced to death by the Japanese court for espionage. Despite his conviction, Sorge's case continued to intrigue both Soviet and Western intelligence agencies. His intelligence was so crucial to the Soviet war effort that Stalin himself had issued a request for Sorge's release. However, Sorge's fate was sealed. On November 7, 1944, he was executed by hanging in a Tokyo prison. He was 49 years old, but the mystery surrounding Richard Sorge does not end with his execution. The circumstances surrounding his death and the details of his final days have fueled speculation for decades. Some have argued that Sorge's capture and execution were part of a larger plot to discredit him and to eliminate a potential threat to the Soviet Union. Others believe that Sorge's own determination to never betray his country and comrades may have led to his death, as he chose to keep his secrets buried rather than reveal the identities of his fellow spies. The most intriguing aspect of Sorge's story is the question of what happened to his remains. After his execution, Sorge's body was allegedly dumped in an unmarked grave in a Tokyo cemetery. However, some researchers believe that his body may have been secretly exhumed by the Soviet Union and returned to Russia. Others have suggested that his body was never found, and that Sorge's final resting place remains a mystery. Despite his death, Richard Sorge's legacy as a spy has endured. His work in Japan during the Second World War was crucial to the success of the Soviet Union and helped to shape the outcome of the war. The information he provided directly influenced key decisions made by Stalin and his generals, particularly in relation to the Eastern Front. Yet, despite his immense contributions, Sorge's name was largely forgotten for many years after his death. In the decades following World War II, Richard Sorge's story was rediscovered by historians and espionage enthusiasts. His role as a Soviet spy was finally acknowledged, and his contributions to the Soviet war effort were recognized. In 1964, Sorge was posthumously awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, one of the highest honors the Soviet Union could bestow. His actions, courage, and commitment to his mission have earned him a place in history as one of the most daring and effective spies of the 20th century. The mystery of Richard Sorge's life and death continues to intrigue scholars and enthusiasts alike. His ability to infiltrate the highest echelons of Japanese society, his invaluable intelligence, and his unwavering loyalty to his cause make him one of the most fascinating figures in the world of espionage. But the mystery of his disappearance and the unanswered questions surrounding his death only add to the intrigue, ensuring that the legacy of Richard Sorge will continue to captivate future generations. Thank you for joining us as we explored the story of Richard Sorge, the Cold War spy who disappeared forever. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to subscribe to Shadow of History for more mysterious, dark, and untold stories from the past. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Until next time, stay curious and continue uncovering the untold stories that have shaped our world.